All right. So I am going to go ahead and get started. I think we have there might be a couple more people joining, but so today's topics, we have two topics today. One is just a review, really, I think, and I'll give you some resources that have been collected at the national level on working with underserved or actually they're using the term now vulnerable populations. And so I'll give you those, and then I'm also going to talk about work-life integration, because I think, to me, that is so important as we are, especially those of you that are just kind of starting in this, and those of you, and I see, we have quite a few that individuals that have been around for a little while, and, I think it's always important that we remind ourselves about that work-life integration, because it really is critical. You will get burned out faster than anything if you don't keep that in mind. So for those of you that just joined, if you can, in the chat box, just quickly type your name and your county, so that way I just have that record of who all is on, because I don't always see it on my end, even in the recording. So, all right, so to start, a couple of terminologies that, you may hear it called underserved audiences, and we really look at that, it's not limited to just members of immigrant or ethnic groups or our rural residents or our urban residents or urban youth, but it could be unemployed, LGBTQ plus youth, homeless, and NIFA, which has been adopted kind of at the national level, we've been using the term vulnerable populations. And it really demonstrates or looks at the groups that are exposed to high risks within 5 dimensions. And those are developmental, emotional, mental, physical, and social. And I'm going to give you just a quick definition of each one of those. So when they talk about developmental vulnerabilities, those are where youth are situated in the context of childhood, and that occurs when childhood does not meet their development, when that children do not meet their developmental milestones. So this could be delays or impairments in cognitive, language, emotional, motor skills. Could be, it could be due to genetics, environment, or the physiological factors. So things like prenatal exposure to toxins, perinatal complications, premature birth, malnutrition, or low birth weight. Then the emotional vulnerabilities are that limits the individual's ability to adapt to their environment. So this could be the inability to monitor and manage their experiences, expressions of, or responses to emotion. And so children with emotional vulnerabilities are, they may be hyper vigilant. They may be easy to overwhelm and anger. They have difficulty in forming relationships. This is probably where you would see, like autism or, that just completely left my brain. Basically autism spectrum, because they are, and a lot of times the factors includes experience abuse, neglect, bullying, rejection, or trauma. And then you have mental vulnerabilities, which are psychological functioning and intellectual ability, but they're associated with problems in learning, memory, perception, and problem solving. So again, that would be another area where you would see the autism spectrum youth. So they may have problems with reading, writing, mathematics, might be environmental or physiological influences related to brain development, genetics. This could be exposure to alcohol, drugs, and lead while in utero. Then you have physical vulnerabilities, which are, they increase the children and youth susceptibility, to bodily injuries, illnesses, and diseases, including asthma and other respiratory ailments, diabetes, malnutrition, or even death. So And that could be, their exposure to environmental hazards, lack of health care, inadequate nutrition, and victimization. And then you have social vulnerabilities, which is that contributes to an individual's susceptibility to experiencing social inclusion. So it affects their overall quality of life because it restricts the equitability access to quality supports and services such as healthcare, educational, vocational, and employment opportunities. So this could be contextual factors on this contribute to social vulnerability, including race, gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and geography. And those definitions I'm going to give to you in, it's in a handout that'll be in the box for you to have. I just wanted to quickly go over those. And then the other piece that I want to share, so a couple of resources for you. One is, and I did double check, and it is still there, on the USDA NIFA website, they do have a lot of fact sheets, and I'm going to share with you those fact sheets. But they are, there's a lot of fact sheets on the different vulnerable populations. And if I can get everybody to mute their mics, that would be fantastic. Thank you. So the other piece, and then I'll share with you some of those fact sheets as we get through. The other piece that I want to share with you, the other resource that I think is really important, is the Access, Equity, Belonging Committee. And this committee was formed it's been around for a while, but it's taken different forms, and it's now regrouped, and it's under what we call the PLWG. Don't worry about that acronym. It's a Program Leaders Working Group. And so all of the 4-H program leaders, we have a group that we work together in. And this is made up of 4-H professionals from across the country. It's not program leaders necessarily. It is mainly a lot of other groups, a lot of other 4-H staff from across the country. It's chaired by a person out of California and a person out of North Carolina. And so what they are is they're working to provide professional development and resources to 4-H professionals, and then indirectly to our volunteers, to strengthen our capacity to engage and sustain the participation of diverse youth in 4-H. And they serve as that coordinating body for national efforts to support the goal. And when I talk about the goal, what that goal is, and I'm going to share that in a little while too, but it's essentially, if you, in the National Strategic Plan, it says by 2025, 4-H will reflect the population, demographics, vulnerable populations, diverse needs, and social conditions of the country. The vision has elements of inclusion, caring adults, and serving a minimum of 1 in 5 youth, and volunteers and staff reflect the diversity of the population. So this working group really is there to support that effort. So part of what they're doing is they have created these champion groups. They used to be called task forces or something, but now they're called champion groups. So there is one on immigrant and refugee youth, one on incarcerated youth, LGBTQ plus youth and community, mental health and well-being, youth experiencing homelessness, youth in foster care, youth in living in poverty, youth with disabilities, and then racial and ethnic groups, so African American youth, Asian American youth, Native American and Pacific Islander youth, and then Latino youth. And there is the opportunity that if anybody is interested in serving on one of these champion groups, just let me know, and I can get you connected. There is an application process for that, but it's a pretty simple process. It'd be great if we could. I know we do have a couple of people serving on those. And so, but like I said, they work, those champion groups are working on defining populations, trends. They're creating a logic model, or they're creating a plan for what they, how we want to work with this. They do presentations at national conferences, or they've done a lot of webinars. And then they're also doing lit reviews and writing journal articles. They're just it's a whole variety of things that they're doing. And then just to share with you some of the chairs. So with immigrant youth, you can see, it's kind of nice because there's such a variety of individuals from across the country that are working in these areas. They are still, those that don't have chairs, they are still looking for somebody to chair those committees or those champion groups. So then I just want to talk a little bit about some of the vulnerable populations, so everybody can have a good idea of what we're looking at. So if you look at the numbers of underserved or vulnerable populations, there's about 110 million minorities in the United States. That makes up about 35% of the population. 1 in 10 counties has a minority-majority population. So that means that what we have always defined as a minority population is now the majority in that area. As you can see in the South, in what we would consider the southern states, about 55% of their population is African American. And in the West, about 43% of our population is Hispanic and 34% is Asian. So I find that really interesting with us. And the U.S. is projected to become a majority-minority nation for the first time in 2043. And then they are projecting that by 2060 there will be 225 million minorities, which will make up 57% of the population. And then if you look at urban versus rural America, this is another one of those vulnerable population groups. About 62 million people, 1 in 5, live in rural areas, and about 250 million Americans live in urban cities. And 75% of the U.S. population shares about 3% of the U.S. land. And 15.4% of rural U.S. citizens live in poverty compared to 11.9% of urban residents, which, I know that we always hear about urban residents living in poverty, but, I think that statistic we need to look at as well very closely. Both of these, or all of these statistics really do fit our state, and we have to look at that. And I know we do have a divide within Nevada, and we call it a north-south divide, but it really is kind of an urban-rural divide. And my goal is to eliminate that divide and to try to really get our programming so we're reaching the needs of all of our youth. And then projecting growth, or our population growth projections, they are predicting that the white population will peak in 2024 and then see a slow decrease from 2024 to 2016. The Black population is expected to increase from 41.2 million to 61.8 million over that same period. So it's going to rise slightly from that. And then the Asian population is predicted to more than double in the United States during that same time frame, and essentially climbing from 5.1% to 8.2%. And then the Hispanic population will more than double between 2012 and 2060. And they're projecting that by 2060, nearly 1 in 3 U.S. residents will be Hispanic. So, and then you can see this is just a graphic. Now, granted, I know that this is a 2012 graphic, but I haven't seen an updated one yet. It'll be, they're getting ready to launch the census for 2020, so I imagine that they will update this. But it still gives us a good idea of where we're at. And then this is the top 10 states with the largest Latino populations. And I know Nevada's increased quite a little since this was put out. So talking about the Latinx or Latino population growth, in 2010, there were 34.9% of Hispanics were under the age of 18, and that was compared to 20.9% of non-Hispanic whites. So when that is the one question that they ask. Most of you, are familiar with those questions on the census. By 2018, it's projected that Latinos will make up 18% of the workforce. And I'm interested, I haven't seen that statistic. I need to look that up to see if that really did come true. But the share of the young Latinos enrolled in college doubled from 2009 to 2010. So, you can see, and I know that that's even increased since this was put out. And then Hispanic children have the highest childhood obesity rate in the country. So about 2 in 5 Hispanic children between the ages of 2 and 19 are classified as either being overweight or obese. And these are all things that we need to think about when we're thinking about programming for our young people is, think about these statistics. So you can see that Latinos are disproportionately affected by HIV/AIDS, and they're 3 times more likely to be affected than their white counterparts. Latinas are 20% more likely to die from breast cancer than white women, and that part of that comes back to our healthy living and teaching young people the skills that they need for to live a healthier lifestyle. So, and a lot of these come down to that. I mean, all children need this, but you can see some of these health factors. And then Asian and African American stats. In 2010, the largest Asian American populations were in California, New York, Hawaii, Texas, New Jersey, and Illinois. The Asian American population is greatly urbanized, with nearly 3/4 of this population living in metropolitan areas with a population greater than 2.5. And then you can see the 10 states with the largest African American population, and the death rate for African Americans was higher than whites in heart disease, stroke, cancer, asthma, influenza, pneumonia, diabetes, HIV/AIDS, and homicide. And then look at the youth stats with this same population, and you can see that the proportion of populations younger than 18 is expected to change very little. It's actually supposed to decrease a little bit, and it is the population estimates show that 50.4% of children younger than 1. This would have been 2011, were Hispanic, Black, Asian American, and other minority groups. And there's currently, we're about, and I think this number is pretty similar, 16 million youth, or about 22%, were living in poverty, and 45% of the children live in low-income families. And if you remember back, it's not just our urban youth that's happening with, it's also our rural youth. And then we talk a little bit, or talk about the LGBTQ plus. And I know this is a topic that we haven't talked much about in Nevada, but I will tell you it is becoming more and more prevalent. We're seeing it more and more with our young people. What we're seeing, we've had transgender youth come to camp. We have had, and we have to we've had to figure out how to accommodate some of those youth. But you can see it's a population that we can't ignore. And that 85% of middle school and high school students identified as LGBT, or 85% of the middle school and high school students that identified as LGBTQ plus were verbally harassed at school in the past year. And so I think more than anything, what we need to do is we need to find the resources to educate ourselves and our volunteers on this. We've had some questions. If some of you are familiar with the enrollment form, and then on the statewide survey, we do ask the question, or on the gender question, it does say, that gender not identified above, and then et cetera. And I think it's important that we ask that question. Last year, we did allow a couple of counties to take out that answer option. This year, we are not, because we are an inclusive organization, and we need to educate ourselves that whether you want to believe it's happening in your community, that you have this population in your community, you do. You very much do. They just may not have they may not be verbal about it yet, but they are there. And by seeing that, it makes them feel like, okay, 4-H is a place that, isn't going to judge me by my sexual preferences. So, and thank you, Marguerite. And I agree. African Americans and Latino or Latinx share some of the same, exactly. They share some of the same social concerns. I would agree. So when we think about our programs, reaching those underserved audiences, what do we need to do, to position ourselves for the changing demographics? We know that that's happening. One of the things that we know we need to do is get our materials translated. We know that it's just figuring out the time and the money to do that, because, it's unfortunate. One of the things that came across in our civil rights audit is they wanted us to do a barrier analysis. It's a special kind of analysis, I guess, on what are all the languages spoken within the 4-H program in the state of Nevada. And I know I have been working with Paul trying to figure out how we could do that. And so, because, while I know Spanish is one of our largest, we probably do have some other languages spoken. And so trying to figure out if that's a large enough pool that, we need to look at translating into that language.
And Carrie, the school districts would have a lot of that. I think in Las Vegas, there's like 50 different languages spoken. We have refugees from Ethiopia and, India, Pakistan, everywhere. Yeah.
Yep. I've heard there's 256 in Vegas. So
okay.
It's quite a bit. And, and again, it'd be tough if we had one child. We could probably accommodate for one child, but if we have a large population of another language being spoken, then we need to look at how we can work with
My
that.
understanding of the federal law is if at least 5% of the population, so obviously Spanish would be, Filipino or Tagalog would be the next. They're basically at 5% as well. Yeah.
And we also have to look at our population too, our 4-H registrations as well.
This would be a way to,
right.
recruit other people, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yep. So we have to think about what partners are needed. It's great in Vegas. They're really fortunate. They have an Asian Chamber of Commerce, and they have a Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and they have an African American Chamber of Commerce, and those are great partners, because those are community members in there, in those communities We probably don't have that opportunity in some of our rural counties, but as some of you that are in those rural counties, think about what are some of the partners that you could get. If anybody, so Marguerite asked a question about provisions or accommodations do we make for transgender or gay youth, sleeping arrangements, bathroom accommodations, gender-related groupings. So at 4-H camp, what we have done is if we do know that we have especially a transgender youth, we speak individually with that youth, and if we know that the parent knows about the transgender situation, then we will talk to the parent as well, find out where they are comfortable, where they want to stay. They will stay. We put changing screens in every cabin, so there is privacy for every youth to change. And what we found is every youth wants those changing screens. They don't want to change in front of everybody. Right now, we do not have any special accommodations for bathrooms, only for the fact that, we're working on we're working on those, but in the new cabins at the 4-H camp, there will be individual, the bathrooms will be in the cabins themselves, and there will be individual showers for so we could have all of those. So we have been making those arrangements. We haven't had to do it a lot, but we have had a few. So we're doing what we need to do for, we're working towards being better about it. But at this point, those are the options. So, and we do, we tell the child wherever you feel comfortable, then that's where you can use the restroom. I mean, we're not excluding anybody from that. So we're letting them make that decision. So. And then again, what partners in our community, and, we need to go back and think about not just, not even just our ethnic groups, but I know several of you in counties have got juvenile prisons or juvenile detention centers. So those are incarcerated youth. So, that could be a partner. Partnering with, with homelessness, with our youth that are homeless. And, we have homeless youth in probably every single county in this state. Again, we want to put our blinders on and not think that we have a homeless problem. You think about homelessness in your urban areas, but I can guarantee that in White Pine County, there's probably some kids living in their cars with their families because, they don't have housing or, so we have to, that's something to think about. How can we work with those youth? And it's not that it's if they're within our 4-H program, or if you wanted to, if we have a county that's interested in looking at that, as a potential new partner for programming, that could be. So as you think about, and then also thinking about what are our opportunities and challenges around that. If you have a young person that is homeless and sleeping, and is living in their car, what are the challenges for them being involved in our 4-H program? Anybody have any thoughts?
Well, transportation seems like an obvious one, I think.
Yeah, transportation, yeah.
What the status is there, and just being in the right mental headspace of if they can't get their basic needs met, how can they be involved in something else?
Yeah, Sandy had filling out the forms. That's one of the reasons, that we say if you can in your office have a computer available for families to come in and use to fill out forms. The ability to contribute to potlucks. I love that one, Sandy. Did anybody else think about that? So many times we have potluck dinners or potluck, things, and It's kind of hard to bring, something. Supplies, if your county, only has, is majority animal projects, that's probably going to be pretty tough. They probably don't want a chicken or a goat or a lamb living in the vehicle with them. So it's thinking about, and it's things, again, we don't want to think about, but we have to. It really is critical that we think about that. I know, So as you're looking at expanding programs, because we do know that both nationally and within our own state, even though we didn't get the enhancement request, and for those of you that are new, we were asking for about $4.7 million in the last legislative session to increase 4-H programming within our state. Part of that is raising, we want to increase our enrollment to 100,000 youth in this state. We're currently reaching about 56,000 youth. So that's almost doubling our numbers. It's almost doubling our numbers. And honestly, that goal has not gone away. Just because we didn't get the funding. Now, granted, we know that within 3 years, we're not going to be able to double our numbers. But there is a goal to reach 100,000 youth in our state, which means we need to look at ways to increase our enrollment. Right now, we're reaching about 4,000 youth in the club program, and part of the reason why I want to look at the club program and how we define that club program is I want us to reach 15,000 youth in the club program. Now, granted, that's not going to look the same as it does today, because the way a lot of the parameters are set up, that's pretty tough. That would be tough to do. But if we look at those parameters and, which is one of the goals for the next year, is to redefine what that club looks like, or other opportunities for what a club can look like. We can keep what we have currently, but then there are other opportunities for us. So that's something that Sarah, Nora, and I are going to be working on. I know quite a bit in the next year. I mean, we're going to be asking everybody to be involved in that, but the three of us are kind of really try to get that moving forward. So, but we need to be thinking about those things. So, and again, this equity, access, equity, and belonging for all. And you can see by 2025, we want our 4-H to reflect our population demographics. Now, for any of you that are interested, I have gone through, and I haven't been able to update it in the last year, I think, or so, but I do have what especially with ethnic and race numbers, because I can get those easily. I have what your county percentage is. What is the percentage of Hispanics in your community, in your county, and then what your 4-H enrollment percentage is. And, our goal is to at least reach what that is. So if you have a 30% Hispanic population in your community, our goal is for you to reach at least 30% Hispanic population within the 4-H program. And so, like I said, because I am a numbers geek and I like to know those things and I like to see those trends. I do have that, but like I said, with this last year being the way it's been, I haven't had a chance to update those with last year's ES 237 numbers, but I also try to put in a number of years in there so that, people can see their trends as well, if you're going up and down in that area. But you can see, some of the things we have to look at, our national trends within 4-H and then externally on marginalizing our populations, taking stock and sharing internal and external promising practices. These are all things that committee is working on. And then also, making sure that we articulate the value of equity work within the 4-H mission and contribute to an inclusive organizational culture. So we also have to advocate internally and externally to support the marginalization of audiences. So you can see this is really the goal, and I think personally for us, we kind of have the same goal in our state, because I think, you know, we need to articulate the importance of reaching these new audiences. It is extremely critical, and giving them the 4-H experience. You know, sometimes, a lot of times what we'll do within the 4-H program, and this has been a trend for a long, long time, is we'll get these great grants too to come in, and we'll do all these wonderful programs in these vulnerable population communities. And then as soon as the grant's over, we leave, and then that program doesn't stay. And so we have to think about sustainability of those programs, and we have to think about you know, how we can articulate, because the other piece is we always get criticized by not our traditional, but our longtime volunteers who don't understand the direction, you know, that we are open to all, and, you know, we need to set up programming for some of those. So, you know, it is a critical thing. That everybody understands the importance of having the entire community involved in the 4-H program, not just those that can afford it, those that have the access to it, and those things. And Marguerite, yes, and that's exactly what we're looking at, is looking at short-term, long-term clubs, having more flexibility within our club structure. We've got some really good resources that we've pulled, and we're going to be working on doing some things. And then, this one, I guess I don't need to worry about that one. So this too is another one that I like. This is a framework to organizing promising practices. If you're not familiar with e-extension, and it's that small e, big X, T, you know, extension website, I would suggest there are some really good resources around working with vulnerable populations. I've got to find we do have a website within the Program Leaders Working Group that is available to all of the staff with resources. I just I wasn't able to find it in the last few days. So I'm going to get that for everybody, and I'll get it this afternoon, you know, before I send out the recording of this for everybody. But essentially, you know, I really kind of like this area where it talks about, you know, the program elements, so providing that positive relationship. This model is just kind of you know, when we're looking at promising practices and how to organize them, this is a good way to do it. And you'll probably see more of this. So again, you know, how should we focus on this? We need to focus on intention, we need to focus on need, and we need to focus on our outcomes. And so that's going to lead us into focusing on the future. So, you know, as you're working in your community, you know, especially as we're getting ready to start the new 4-H year, it's a really good time to reflect on what's been happening and what you can do to, you know, what are some ways that you can increase some of your programming. So, and looking at what those needs are. And if anybody would like help on trying to find some of those resources, just let me know. I'm sure, you know, between myself and Nora and Sarah, we pretty much, most of us know where to find those resources, and we can, you know, we can work with you to figure out, you know, if there is a need in your community to, you know, to maybe look at offering some different types of programming. Okay. So the other piece I want to talk about, this came out in our civil rights audit, is some of our staff did not understand what our civil rights, what the laws were, what the university policy was, what, you know, what we have what are our legal obligations regarding civil rights. So you can see one of the things that is required on any flyer or brochure that we put together needs to have this civil rights, or is it this one? Anyway, on the website is the civil rights. I don't think it's this one. Yeah, maybe it is. Anyway, it has to have the civil rights statement on it. It has, the University of Nevada, and I was just going to see if I could, I don't think I can pull one up really quick for you. But essentially it needs to have the statement. So, where discrimination is found to have occurred, the university will act to stop the discrimination and prevent its occurrence. So what it also says is that on the statement that we have, and when I send this out to everybody, I will make sure to include that statement, so everybody knows what it is. I know it is a challenge to put it on every document. If you do a brochure, if you do a flyer, enrollment form, any of that statement needs to be on there. Okay, I'm just making a note to send that out to everybody. And then also, you can see this is the USDA's discrimination policy. If we do, the step in Nevada is really to file an official complaint with the UNR, but we have had at times a civil rights, I haven't seen one. I know it happens, but I haven't seen one, is to be able to file a complaint with USDA. So the Title IX office information for employees, if you do feel like you have been subject to discrimination or sexual harassment by anyone, then it is encouraged that you do file a complaint, or you need to. You can read the statement. I'm also in the handouts that I'm sending you. It does have the full policy for the university. You may file a discrimination or sexual harassment complaint with your immediate supervisor, who will then turn it into the right person at the university. And I've got the university information on the next page. If you don't feel comfortable with your immediate supervisor, then you could potentially bypass them and file a complaint with any of the other listed officials. And then the supervisor will be notified, in the university's Title IX office will work with you. So this is the website to file a grievance or a complaint, and then to find out more information, here's the website for that. And just to, all University of Nevada Cooperative Extension Program participants, and this could be, going back to the filing a complaint, that could also be, just so you're aware, any 4-H volunteer or any 4-H youth could also file a complaint. So you need to make sure that your volunteers know, and I know Paul was working on some training for volunteers around sexual harassment and discrimination. Right now they're required to go through the universities, but we're trying to get an exemption from that and come up with our own. But our volunteers and our youth do need to know that they have the right to file a discrimination or a sexual harassment complaint too. So, our program participants making decisions or carrying out actions on behalf of an extension program are responsible for making sure that the program is inclusive for everyone. So again, we could have a volunteer file a complaint against a volunteer if they don't feel like that volunteer is being inclusive for everybody. So certified, screened, or enrolled volunteers working in extension programs are responsible for following our policies. And so, and then I'm going to share with you some potential barriers. But that includes both 4-H, Master Gardeners. I don't know if we have any Master Food Preservers in Nevada. That's a program that other states have. But I know some of our other programs do have volunteers. So some of our barriers to civil rights, oops, I think I skipped one. Nope, I didn't. Okay, some of our barriers to civil rights laws. One is language, culture, economics, access, and communication needs. Other things could be distance and location, underserved audiences, learning ability, and special needs. So going to language barriers, they're not, language barriers should not limit program participation. You should do your best to provide participation opportunities that are not specific to one audience. So part of that, and I don't know if this one, I'm just looking to see if we have the issue of, it's been about a year since I looked at this one. Okay, yep, I do talk about special communications needs. If we can at all possible, it's great if we could translate things, or if you have a, so one thing, a lot of times we do Spanish-speaking presentations as well, where it's all done in Spanish, but if you have a non-Spanish speaking participant, then you need to do it in both languages. And so, but it is good if you have a majority of your audience is Spanish speaking. It'd be great if you could do a program in both Spanish, do it both in Spanish and in English, or whatever the English, whatever that other language. If you have somebody that is proficient, we are trying to do our best right now to work on getting things translated into Spanish. At this point, we're not there, but we are trying to. So, cultural barriers, and this is one that we don't think of a lot, but scheduling events that conflict with major religious or ethnic holidays or events. We would never think about putting anything on Christmas Day, right? That's just a given for most of the United States. But what about Ramadan? What about Rosh Hashanah? There's a lot of holidays out there that we have a population that does participate in, and we should think about that. I'm becoming more and more culturally sensitive to these types of things because my son's best friend is my son's best friend is Muslim. And so it's been a great learning experience. This is my first exposure to somebody in the Muslim religion. His parents came from Afghanistan. And so I would, for me, I'm learning a lot of these cultural barriers. I noticed the other day that the Clark County Fair was on the Easter weekend. And I thought, oh, really? So, but again, we have to think about, and I know it's not a religion, we're not supposed to be tying religion into it, but we have to be culturally sensitive to those things. Staging activities or events that are in a potentially uncomfortable location, like churches, bars, private clubs, or locations where groups were previously rejected. We need to think about those things are important. And then program activities that include food or activities that are insensitive or sensitive to religion. It should be sensitive to religious or cultural, dietary, or behavior restrictions. That is very true as well. When I'm learning about, with Zaid, that make sure you don't, if you're ordering pizza for a family or, ordering pizza for a 4-H program, don't have everything be pepperoni or Canadian bacon. You want to make sure you have veggie or cheese or something, because Muslims can't eat pork. And, there are some other faiths that can't eat pork. And so if you don't have that opportunity, then you need to be aware of that. And Marguerite, you say make sure that lessons and programs are not so academic. Make sure that they are research-based materials. You can have research-based materials that are not academic, but they absolutely have to be research-based. So that, because that's what makes 4-H 4-H. So, yeah, Seventh-day Adventists don't eat pork. Thank you. I knew that there were some others, and I just couldn't remember. But here's the other thing. Seventh-day Adventists meet, their religious day is on Sunday, or on Saturdays. And so we have to be cognizant of that as well. When I was in Idaho, we never, ever had anything on Sundays because of the major religious population that was there. Sundays were off limits. And that was across the state. If you live in a community that is high Seventh-day Adventist, then you would not have things on Saturdays, and you have to be aware of that. And then economic barriers, things like conditions that limit or exclude disadvantaged, alienated, racial, minority, and ethnic groups. So programs, activities, or events conducted involving a high cost in which members are asked to participate. So one of the things that you need to be aware is economically, we cannot afford anymore to provide absolutely everything for free within the 4-H program. But what you need to do is you have to have the ability to provide scholarships for people. If you do have families that cannot afford the to the cost, then you need to have other alternatives for them. So, but just know that, we can, it's just not economically feasible anymore for us to provide everything in the 4-H program for free. And so, and you need to be, clubs need to be thinking about that. And they can be raising money for the different events. Clubs can vote on activities that they want to raise funds for. There's nothing against them raising funds. There's nothing against them going out and doing a bake sale, doing a car wash, doing these types of things. So, and I've had a lot of clubs that do that. If, they'll go out and raise money for, to buy books for everybody, or they'll, those types of pieces. Programs, meetings, tours, activities, or events. And bake sales are always questionable. I shouldn't have probably said bake sales, but a lot of times health departments don't allow them. But you can do, car washes. There's lots of ideas. Kiss a goat. I don't know if anybody's ever done the kiss a goat where, that you show up to my office, I have a goat, I pay you $20 to take the goat away. And I don't have to do the goat, I don't have to have this goat in my office for an hour or whatever. Those raise a ton of money. The other one, chicken or cow plop is cool. The other one I have seen that has been raising a ton of money for people lately is like a 4K run, sponsoring a 4K run, or a bicycle race, or a bicycle rodeo, or, there's lots of things that you can do. Clubs need to be creative in that. And then, we need to think about activities that require extensive purchase of equipment or supplies. I know we have to think about that as a county too. STEM programs are expensive. You can do STEM programming on the cheap, but to do, a lot of them, it is not a cheap venture. So we have to think about that as well. And what are the communities that we're going into? So access, we need to, shooting sports is very expensive, but there are a lot. There's the Friends of the NRA grants. Last year, Nevada received probably close to $75,000 in grant funds to support shooting sports so that kids don't have to buy equipment. And I was talking to one of the committee members that awards the grants, and they love our 4-H program, and they will continue to fund it as long as grants are decently well written. And you'll get more information about those grants soon. So access barriers, we have to look at, are our facilities that we're holding meetings in, and this is also our club meetings, are they accessible to people in wheelchairs? If you happen to have somebody come in a wheelchair, it needs to be accessible. That's one of the things, one of the other pieces, our camp going down to the beach is kind of wheelchair accessible. It is technically wheelchair accessible, but we know it's not good. So that's one of the goals in the master plan, is to make that trip or to make it better. And then, when wheelchair access isn't cannot be provided permanently, can that individual be advised on site about how to gain access? So something could be, I was in an office one time, and it was before it was really required. And our back room, one of the back rooms was not wheelchair accessible, but we had a sign on the door that said, if you do require access through a wheelchair, call this number and we will come, and help you. Sandy, convicted felons out on parole can be an issue. That can be a lot of issues with, that's more of a child protection issue, but rather than a civil rights issue, but it could be a civil rights issue. Well, no, because we don't allow, depending on the felony, they may not be involved in our program. But for you, especially where your office is located, you do have that issue sometimes. So. And then communications needs. If you do have somebody that is hearing or vision impaired, then we do have the obligation to provide them with either a sign language interpreter, or somebody to read to them what the materials are. And you have to have, there's all kinds of steps with the university that you have to do with that. And so in order to do that, you typically would contact the office on campus, the Title IX office on campus, or whatever it is. Yeah. Anyway, that equal opportunity office, and they can set you up with somebody. Now, the thing is it will cost you to do that. And so, but essentially it is the program that is conducting, it's the county that's conducting that program is typically, I believe, who would pick up that cost. And depending on the length of the program, if you may need 2 interpreters for sign language, they have laws about all of that stuff. So if you ever run into that, you need to contact me, and I will help you, I'll help walk you through that. One thing, I'm going back to the access barriers because this just came up this week. We do have a young lady that is going to be participating in the state 4-H shooting sports event that is in a wheelchair. And so we have to, they let me know. We will work with them to make those accommodations at the event. And I know Sandy, she's participated in the past, so a lot of our individuals are familiar with her. And so it's been a few years since she has, but we will work with her to make those accommodations. But again, we have to do that because of the situation, which is great. I love it. I've had young people show a steer that are in a wheelchair. What we do is the accommodation is, depending on the steer, they have somebody with them. They may be holding the rope and somebody's pushing the wheelchair, or somebody's walking right beside them with that, they may be holding the rope while that child is going beside them in the wheelchair. So, but we do, yeah, and you can suggest independent projects, Sandy. Probably if it's like a hearing or vision impaired. What I'm thinking too is if you're conducting, so an example, Nora, if you guys are conducting a program at AD Guy where you have a hearing impaired youth that is participating in that workshop, you would then have to provide the sign language interpreter for that. Where I've seen it mostly is in adult programs. If you're doing volunteer training and you have a hearing impaired adult, you would have to provide that sign language interpreter. So, yeah, it's always.
I've worked with them in my previous position. We always had there's 2 companies here in Las Vegas. You just, call them, schedule it. They do require like 2 hours minimum. I think it's $175 an hour. And then if it's more than 2 or 4 hours, like you said, you do have to have 2 interpreters because they have to alternate.
Yep. And that's, so counties need to know that they supply a doctor's report. Sometimes we may need that. It just depends on what it is. And then, yes, so in the statement that you put on all registration materials and all of that, they need to let you know, you put a timeline, if you need special accommodations, you need to know by this date. And usually it's at least a week out from that event so that you can make those provisions. They can't, and that's, I will tell you, if they come to you the day before or the day of, the university is going to tell you, they're going to tell you, no, we can't. There's no way we can make those accommodations. Another one that I had just to share, and I wanted to get to the other section to you, but the other piece that I think this is more important than the balancing, I may schedule another session for the balancing work-life integration, because I think that's an important topic, but this one's super important. But one of the things, so we had a young person one time, this was not here in Nevada, this was in one of my other jobs, they came to us and said they had a severe peanut allergy, but they wanted to go to camp. And so we worked with the university, and and basically the university came back and said, we cannot guarantee that child will be safe. And it wasn't, it's not a it wasn't a protected class under the civil rights laws. And so they basically came back and said, we can't guarantee that it's a peanut-free kitchen. We can't guarantee that, somebody isn't going to bring peanuts. And so, it's your choice whether you send your kids or not. And so you may have some of those accommodations as well that, and it's a tough decision, but you sometimes have to say, I'm sorry, it's, it's tough, but we can't guarantee it. So programs intended to target limited resource audiences may not be successful if they're required to drive to that event. So if you can find a location that's within close proximity to where, the majority of the audience lives, then that is going to draw a lot bigger audience. The other piece, a lot of times if you're doing something after school or even in the summertime, if you can provide a food to the young people, especially if they're walking there, then that's even better, because it gives them, they get either a meal or they get a snack. And that is that's a big thing. Also, if you have families with small children, single parents, two earner households, or other types of underserved audiences, they may not be able to participate in extension events at certain times of the day or certain days of the week. I know I get so irritated with the schools because they will hold PTO meetings, they will hold all of these things, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So for me as a working mom, can I participate in that? Well, we're a little more, extension is a nice, as we think about work-life integration, extension is kind of nice, and we can flex out a little bit. I could, but essentially, I really can't, because it's in the middle of the workday. It's tough. And so we have to be, are you going to have your leaders council meetings at 4 o'clock in the afternoon? Probably not. You're going to want to make it so it does fit with as many people as we can with their schedules. And then learning situations where and this is what Marguerite was talking about, those learning situations where the subject matter content is too complex. And so you have to think about, if you do have something that is a really complex idea, think about how you could break that down into smaller, into easier concepts. Maybe you don't do the whole lesson one time, maybe you break it down. Yeah, Sandy said we had to shift most meetings to 6:30 to 8 due to working families. Both mom and dad are working, and that's a big thing. So programs need to plan to anticipate special needs, deliver maximum access and limit the barriers. I think it's always important that we just think about some of those things ahead of time. Even if nobody will get a hold of you for accommodation, I think it's still important to think about some of them. And then specific issues, purpose of 4-H is to provide positive youth development to meet the needs of our youth, so that they experience belonging, mastery, independence, and generosity, or our 4-H essential elements to foster that educational opportunities that are tied to our land-grant university knowledge base. And our program participants making decisions or carrying out actions on behalf of our 4-H program keep that goal in mind at all times. Yeah. And, educational programs that provide through youth and volunteer development, the knowledge transfer, life skill development, and attitudes for positive youth development. It is a reminder to people that participating in the 4-H program is a privilege, not a right. So if we have individuals who violate the code of conduct, or their conduct is deemed detrimental to the best interests of the program, both by us as extension personnel or their appointed representative, they can be excluded from participating in the program in the future. If we have volunteers that absolutely refuse to let a certain audience into their program, we can ask them to not participate, or we can just tell them that they're not participating in the future anymore. We have every right to do that if they are not allowing for inclusivity. And so just one of I know most of you have seen this quote, but I love it. It's, we learn from crayons. Some are sharp, some are dull, some are pretty, some have weird names, and they're all different colors, but they all live in the same box, and we have to remember that. Okay. And so, and I've got 10:14, and that is not enough time to go through that. What I'm going to do is share with everybody. I'm going to share with you some of the resources that we have, so that way you can see those. And then I will go through, and I'm going to schedule a different time to do the integrating work and family, because we can't necessarily do it next time either, because next time we'll take the full time. So, okay. I just have to figure out where my documents are. Whoop, I don't want to share it. Okay, so there is a really good This one. Okay. Michigan State has put together a really good document on inclusive 4-H and expanding inclusive opportunities for both youth and volunteers. So I'm going to share that. I don't know if it's going to. I think you guys are seeing a black screen, aren't you? Here, let me try it now. Here we go. Okay. So hopefully you're seeing this inclusive 4-H, expanding inclusive opportunities. If you aren't seeing that, then let me know in the chat box, but I think that's what you're seeing. Oh no, I just deleted, or I just stopped sharing it. Why did it do that? Okay, there we go. Okay, so with this, essentially, what I like is it goes through, you know, what a disability is, what a disability is not. Consider physical, I mean, it gives you all of these pieces. It talks about when you're working with a person with a visual disability, when you're working with somebody with a physical disability. It's got just a, you know, adaptions can be simple. So again, they give you good hands-on ideas of ways to work with these audiences. And it gives you some activities on how to get others to think about language. I don't know if you talks about language. And then I was going, here's just some good activities for getting people to think about it. So this is going to be, that one will be in the Nevada box files. There, I've got one on working with, let's see. This is one that California has done on, are you seeing the steps to creating inclusive? Nora, if you are, say yes or no. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So steps for creating inclusive programs. This is for LGBTQ+. This is one that was put together in California. I've had it for a number of years, but it's got some really good programs that you could do with youth or with volunteers. It's also got some really good information for you as a resource. California has also put together 4-H camp practices for inclusion of all for gender identity. So that's another one. And then these vulnerable populations, these are the fact sheets that I was mentioning. I don't know, can you guys see that? Vulnerable populations for children and youth with disabilities. Is that the one you're seeing? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good. So there are all of those working groups that I showed you earlier. Those are they have a fact sheet for all of those. So it's just kind of essentially a beginning stage. So these have got, like I said, there's lots of them. So, and all of those are, in fact, they're already all in the Nevada box. So once I get this recording translated, essentially in YouTube, then I will send out that with the Nevada box files. So and then I will make sure that I get that statement that you need to put on all documents. And I'll put that in, probably in a Word document for everybody. So any questions on this topic? Essentially what, you know, we need to, you know, it's important for us to think about, you know, think about all of the audiences in our community and how can we reach those audiences, and how can we reach them in a way that is that they can get the full 4-H experience, not just a one-time walk into a school and do a 1-hour program. But we want them to see, what all 4-H has to offer. That's one of the things that we got heavily dinged on. And I'll tell you, it wasn't just Nevada that got dinged on it. Every state that's gone through a civil rights audit in the last 4 years has been dinged on this. And our group enrollments, how do we then transfer them into our club enrollments? And so they have the same opportunities that our club, how do they get to go on national trips? How do they get to go, to Expo? How do they get, those opportunities? And so, that's why we're really, working on trying to figure out how we can do that across the state. So. I know Marguerite and Louisa brought, youth that probably would not have had the opportunity in the past. They brought them to 4-H Day at the legislature this last year. And I hope it was a great experience for them and they got to see what else is available, and other things, within our state. And we want all youth to have those opportunities. I think it's critical. So, all right. Well, anybody have any questions?
Carrie, this is Nora. I just wanted to add a little bit, when you were talking about the different, the health disparities and the different, health inequities, you mentioned about teaching and keeping that in mind in terms of education with the populations, like, Latino women more likely to die of breast cancer. There's a lot of evidence that shows that it's not just, people's behavior. There's a lot of disparities in treatment. So like Latino women, we're more likely to die of breast cancer. We actually have lower breast cancer rates. There's a disparity in the treatment. So Latinos and this is across the different groups, like we're less likely to be recommended for expensive treatment, for experiential treatment, less likely to be referred for like early preventative stuff. So there's also things in our system that needs to be addressed, not necessarily can be addressed in 4-H, but just to keep in mind, it's not always just the individuals. There's like systemic issues that need to be addressed.
I think what we could do in 4-H, though, is give the young people the skills to be able to stand up for their rights.
Critical thinking and advocating for yourself. Absolutely.
And I think that's definitely something that we can give to our young people. And I agree, Sandy, we need to be aware of the Native American populations. That working group or that champions group doesn't have a chair right now. So I think, that's something, I don't think they've gotten a lot of information, but we do, we need to be aware of those things, with our Latino and African American populations, but also our Native American population. But I think just giving the young people the skills to advocate for themselves is
that's perfect. Yeah, that's great.
Yep. And I don't think to me it doesn't matter who you are. We need those skills. So.
Oh yeah, and healthcare is just so. We talk about education needing help here. There's so many issues in healthcare and people that don't stand up for themselves, and just you have to try to fight and advocate. Otherwise, if you just go with, oh, you're fine.
Exactly.
There's lots of stories of things that did not work out.
Yep, exactly. So, all right. Thank you. Yes, I would agree with that, Nora. And that's probably something I'm going to make a note in there to make sure next time that I mention that. So.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions?
Great stuff.
All right. I'm not going to schedule the work-life integration for next week because we have the 4-H or 4-H online sessions, and I don't want to give too many things for you guys. So it'll probably be the week after that. that I will schedule that for everybody. You know, I'll probably do it at the same time on the Wednesday, just because that seems to work. But because I think it's a critical topic as well. I really do. So, all right. Well, if not, thank you guys and have a great